A great American is what we all want to achieve. And as we take a look at America, we have to look at it through our own perspective. And on this day, Memorial Day of 2023, I'm going to offer you mine. Somewhere along the way, around the 1400s, there was a family that decided to leave Dublin in Ireland. Uh, we're not really sure why. It's actually considered to be prehistory of Ireland. But they were headed up by, I believe, Robert Donelson or John Donelson. And they left and settled in Canada for a short period, up until about, I'd say, the 1600s. And then started to make their way to the United States and ended up in Franklin County, Virginia, with a man whose name was John Donelson. And he became involved in a relationship with a woman whose name was Rachel Stockley. And together, they formed a family of 13. They had 11 children in their time together in Virginia. John was a surveyor. John also built Washington Furnace, located there in Franklin County, Virginia. And then, for one reason or another, decided to take his family and head out to North Carolina. An unsettled territory. There was a lot of issues. And he went there to survey, I believe, and decided that with the situation the way it was with the Irish, the Indians, and the English, it wasn't something that was conducive to the American dream that John Donelson was seeking. So he left. They went down to the river and they put together a bunch of logs, basically, and tied them together and made them one of those huck finn type arrangements to put their belongings on, along with their 11 children. And they left. And the trail that they took probably took years as they followed down the river. There was Indians, of course. There was Revolutionary soldiers. I'm sure they ran into English, Irish. And it was a hostile time because it wasn't the America that we know today. It's the America that they were creating. It was a frontier. They were pioneers. They were doing things that had not been done before. They were just sort of going with the flow of life, if you will. And I think that's part of the zest of the story. It's part of the excitement that you feel inside when you read about great pioneers like the Donelsons, because they didn't pretend to be in control. They were living life as it came and doing the best they could in their situations. One day, Stockley Donelson, one of the younger males, decided that he wanted to get off the boat with his belongings and a few family members and settle. And so John, his wife Rachel, and their daughter Rachel, and some other relatives, they weren't too ready to settle down like he was. So they split company, and Stockley started his own place there, a little fort that became a town that's still here in 2023, called Crab Orchard, Tennessee. It's an amazing story, and I smile because it's my family that was a big part of the creation, if you will, of Crab Orchard, Tennessee. And my family is the Donelson Smith family on my mother's side. And so, as I did some research into some of the things that went on back then, I ran across a picture, and it made me cry because it looked just like my little brother. It really did. My papa, Jack Donelson, he favored my little brother quite a bit. And I lost my brother a few years back. I've lost my whole family, really, uh, except for a few. But when I seen that picture of Stockley Donelson, it took the breath out of me. It's attached below, and people who knew my brother Billy Ham will take great pleasure in the fact that you can sort of see him uh, in this picture of a man that had to be in the 1800s, if not before. And that's how uh, interesting we are as human beings, because we've got different bloods in us and different genetic structures, and little things like that. Uh, they'll show you that there is a God, and He'll remind you as you search for knowledge what it is that life is all about. After you get through the crab orchard history and the development of this little town in Tennessee, you get to a part, I guess it was somewhere around 1943, where my mother was born, and her name was Mary Donelson, and she was born of Jack Donelson and Frances Smith. She was born there at the uh, Rockwood Hospital, uh, and she weighed 13 pounds and 12 ounces. She was a big baby. She was born, they admitted my grandma, and my grandpa's stomach had burst, and he was having a lot of medical problems. And this is at the time that World War II was going on. So one day I was lucky enough to be sitting there with my grandma, and she was sharing the story with me about the birth of my mother, and we were laughing. And she said, "Would you do me a favor? Would you go over there in that box and look for a picture with a letter in it?" And I said, "Okay." And I went and got her box and went through a little bit, and I found it. And there was a letter in there to my grandpa from Private Roy E. Smith. It's the first time I'd ever seen it, and it's the first time I'd ever heard anything about it. And she told me that that was a friend of Jack's who went off to fight in the Great War. And she told me that back when the war first started, she said you couldn't hardly find a man in the state of Tennessee. That's how many people got up and went to fight after Pearl Harbor had happened. And Roy Smith was one of them, and he was a friend of Jack's. And Jack wanted to go, but because of his stomach issues, he didn't get to go. And so he sat down and wrote a letter to my grandpa and sent it here from wherever he was in Europe. And it went, through the mailing system called V-mail, and then ended up in Crab Orchard, Tennessee, probably at a general store where they shopped at, like you see on the Waltons. And they went in, and the clerk said, "You got mail," and handed it to them. And they put it inside of a frame, and it's still here today, which is amazing that piece of mail has survived for 80 years. It'll be 80 years in 2024. And what a memorial to a man who gave his life in service to the United States of America and the rest of the world in his battle against Germany, to bring closure to one of the saddest chapters in the history of the world, as we've seen genocide, not for the first time in history, but for the first time on our doorsteps. For the first time it was in our face. How wide-ranging a hate group can reach with a little fear, a little leadership, and a whole lot of ignorance. And I got to share that story and got a thank you from the family in Crab Orchard, Tennessee, and I'd like to share it with you.